I want to start this video by sharing a story from one of my friends. I had wanted to explore some of the haunted parts of my city, and I mentioned something that piqued his interest. It was a local trail. A trail he had previously walked with his family. He spoke of his hatred towards that trail. He spoke of an intense dread he felt while he walked it. "Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful trail," he said, "but I wanted to leave the moment I stepped past that gate." Located on the very northwest tip of Iowa, the Gitchie Manitou State Preserves present themselves as a harmless hiking trail for anyone willing to make the trek, but their history presents a different story. The land was purchased by Iowa in 1916 for use as a quarry, but the plans ultimately fell through. The area would then be named a state park, and finally, in 1969, it was demoted to a state preserve. However, this video wouldn't be sitting on this channel if that was it. Something much more sinister unfolded at the preserve in the year 1973. This story begins with the Fryer brothers, Alan, age 29, David, age 24, and James, age 21. They were wandering the preserves one night in hopes of poaching some deer when they stumbled upon a campfire in the distance. Circling the campfire were 5 teenagers. Stuart Bade, the oldest of the group at 18, brought his brother Dana Bade, age 14, along with him. Also attending were Roger Asim, age 17, Michael Hadrath, age 15, and Sandra Chesky, age 13. David Fryer, the middle child, was sent to spy on the group of kids and returned later, informing the other 2 of the kids' marijuana possession. The brothers then sat down and formulated a plan. They were to pose as narcotics officers and take the marijuana by force. The 3 of them returned to their truck and armed themselves with shotguns. They crept back to the campfire and positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the teens. It was at this point that their original plan fell through, as the 3 brothers opened fire on the teenagers. Roger was killed immediately and Stuart severely wounded. In a panic, the remaining teenagers scattered into the trees, desperately seeking cover. But the Fryer brothers weren't finished. They ordered the teenagers to come out of their hiding places, saying they were officers. Reluctantly, Michael and Sandra emerged from the trees, unsure of what was happening. They then questioned who the brothers were, but just as Alan responded, he shot Michael in the arm, sending him to the ground. In cold blood, Alan looked down at Michael and Sandra and forced them back onto their feet, demanding that they were only, quote, plain dead. Alan and David Fryer dragged Dana, Michael, and Sandra away from the campfire, taking them further into the preserve. Meanwhile, Stuart's agonized cries echoed throughout the preserve, a chilling reminder of what the remaining kids were soon to face. Sandra, tied up and terrified, was thrown into the back of the Fryers' pickup truck. Her friends, Dana and Michael, were left behind with James and David Fryer. As the truck pulled away, Sandra could still see the figures of her friends standing near the road, unaware that this would be the last time she'd see them alive. Once Alan had left with Sandra, the brothers coldly executed the 3 remaining teenagers with their shotguns, ending their lives in the quiet isolation of the preserve. The following day, a couple from a neighboring town made a grisly discovery while exploring the park. They stumbled upon the bodies of Dana, Michael, and Stuart. It wouldn't be until a day later that Roger's body left by the campfire was found. As Alan Fryer drove through the night with Sandra, he continued insisting he was a police officer and called himself, quote, the boss, unquote, assuring her that his brothers would do whatever he told them to do. After some time, they arrived at an old farmhouse where David and James Fryer were already waiting in another car. Without a word, Alan parked the truck. He got out and began talking to his brothers, their voices a low murmur in the stillness. Then, to Sandra's horror, James Fryer entered the truck and committed an unspeakable crime. The cruelty didn't end there. Alan, still maintaining his identity as a police officer, told Sandra they needed to investigate the farmhouse. He grabbed a club and tried to coax her into the building with the pretext of, quote, looking for critters. Trembling with fear, Sandra refused, believing that entering the farmhouse would certainly mean death. After a tense moment, Alan relented, and they left the farm. Before leaving, Alan filled his truck with gasoline from a large red tank beside the farmhouse, a detail that would later become critical to the investigation. With the tank filled, Alan promised Sandra that he would take her home, still pretending to be concerned about her age and saying disgustingly that she was, quote, too young to get busted, unquote. The next few days would change everything. Despite being just 13 years old, Sandra's bravery and sharp memory became instrumental in bringing the Fryer brothers to justice. On November 29, 1973, accompanied by Lyon County Sheriff Craig Vinson, Sandra retraced the dark path that had led her to the farmhouse. As they drove through the countryside, she spotted the red fuel tank beside the garage and recognized it instantly. This was the place where her nightmare had unfolded. By sheer coincidence, as they neared the farm, Alan Fryer himself drove by in the same brown pickup truck he had used the night of the murders. Alan was quickly pulled over and arrested, and within days his brother, David and James, were also taken into custody. Unsurprisingly, during their investigations, the Fryers tried to shift the blame. Alan initially claimed that the teenagers had shot at them first, but as his story unraveled under scrutiny, he finally admitted to what had happened, though he continued to justify their actions by claiming the teens had been smoking marijuana. David Fryer gave a similar account, but in time he too confessed to the murders. James Fryer, the youngest of the brothers, was quick to throw his siblings under the bus, claiming that he had only gone along with their plan out of fear and that the murders had been Alan and David's doing. In the months that followed, the trials of the Fryer brothers became a media spectacle. Sandra's testimony, in particular, proved to be the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Despite her young age, she spoke clearly about the horrors of that night, her bravery shining through in every detail she recalled. The gruesome nature of the crime, combined with Sandra's composed account, left little room for doubt in the minds of the jury. On February 12, 1974, David Fryer pled guilty to multiple counts of murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His sentencing was punctuated by a chilling statement, quote, "If all my appeals fail, I'll write to the governor and ask for the death penalty. I won't live out my life in jail. Keeping me locked up for life can't turn around what happened. It can't bring those people back." Alan Fryer, after undergoing psychiatric evaluations, was also found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms. His trial concluded on May 20th, 1974. Meanwhile, James Fryer, despite his attempts to deflect blame onto his brothers, was convicted in December 1974 and sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences and 8 years for manslaughter. Though the trials brought some semblance of justice, the scars left on the Gitchie Manitou Preserve would never fully heal. The area, once a place of quiet beauty, had become a symbol of unimaginable brutality. And for Sandra, her courage in facing her attackers ensured that the memory of her friends and their senseless deaths would never be forgotten. The preserve itself, despite its history, is shining with beauty, especially in the fall season I walked it. When I arrived, I was met with various spray-painted signs, foreshadowing what was to come. The trail started with a long, rusty red gate that I quickly walked past, and from there things were pretty quiet. As I stepped forward, hundreds of crickets would jump into the bushes, creating an eerie sound as I progressed, and the entire 10-minute walk to the main attraction was very, very blissful. There were several other trails that veered off the main road, but I didn't take my chances. I've heard the occasional crackhead makes their appearance in the area, and I wasn't very keen on meeting one. My thoughts were then interrupted by a long slab of painted rocks in the distance. I approached the structure behind it in awe. Tucked away in this otherwise lackluster trail was a marvelous, colorfully spray-painted structure. Names and vulgar images were covering every inch of the place, and I couldn't help but respect the dedication and collective effort put into the thing. From what I read, the building was set up by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s and later was abandoned. The campfire, ironically, still smelled of smoke, notifying me that people had recently lit it. Glass shards also littered every inch of the floor, crunching as I walked. My curiosity ended up getting the best of me, and I walked around to the back of the structure and climbed up some jagged rocks to the top of the ruins. I leaned up against the chimney and began to look around. The view was absolutely incredible, so much so that I sat up there for a few minutes, basking in the crisp fall weather. I walked a little longer past the building and ended on the river, not wanting to go any further. The preserve was creepy, not just from the murders, but from the knowledge of how close it was. It wasn't in some far-off place. I hopped in my car, and I was here. I strongly encourage anyone watching this, if you like getting scared, go find places like this. Places with stories, places you live by. That's what makes local horror so terrifying. My last mention covers a notable thing at the entrance of the ruins. As I walked up, there was a sign that read, "Rest in peace, Anna, January 2023. A little white flower was painted next to the words. Those words stuck with me, especially in a place I never expected them. Despite death, despite struggle, the Gitchie Manitou Preserve serves as a symbol to me, and hopefully to you, that there's always light, even in some of the world's darkest places." One last thing before you go, just know that these videos take an extraordinary amount of time. I would really appreciate it if you subscribed, liked, or just continued to watch my videos. I'm hoping to do some more high quality projects in the future, and continued support is the only way that can be possible. Thank you, and goodbye.